Life.Church created this podcast because we all need healthy conversations with real people. So this podcast is here to help you start conversations with your life group, friends, and family. Now, on to the show.
Well, welcome back to the You've Heard It Said podcast. This is Allie.
And this is Jason. And it's still 2020.
Yep. The year that kind of feels like 16 years all at once. The year that is kind of like a hashtag that you just add to things that are really crazy or frustrating. So it's just like hashtag 2020.
Yep. Like when you show up to work without your computer, 2020.
Right. Yeah.
And so then you drive back home. But on your way home, you go through a drive-through to get a coffee, like just the exact coffee you want. And then they give it to you and you take a sip, but you still have your mask on. So you spill it all over your pants. 2020.
Accurate. But this year, as we talked about last season, does have a lot of opportunities for us to get better, get to know people better. But also, then there's, the social media aspect. So as we record, my social media is full of people talking about politics and elections coming up in America. Yeah, you haven't seen spicy people on your timeline?
No, it's like everyone's kind and...
Okay, well, I may be needing your Facebook login.
Just totally kidding.
But after we release this, the election will have happened. And still, no matter what happens, half of our country is going to be really disappointed.
Right. So last season, we really wanted to look inward and see how this crazy year might just help us to become like a little bit healthier by learning how to rest or process our emotions, have healthy relationships with social media. But this season, we wanted to start looking outward and figure out how can we not just make ourselves better, but how can we be part of making the world around us better?
For sure. Yeah, because for me, I know that the more that I focus on myself and my own circumstances, the more freaked out and anxious and frustrated I become.
Right.
But when I take a little bit more of like an others first attitude, I usually feel way more at peace, so much more empathetic, and things in general just seem to feel better. So speaking of empathy, in this episode, we are asking a big question. It's a hard one. We're trying to figure out, can we love people we disagree with? And if so, how?
Yeah, that's a hard one.
So I thought that we would start out by practicing.
Great.
So I'm going to say some unpopular opinions, and I want to hear yours too, Jason. And we have to be civilized humans about them.
Okay,
so for starters, I think that frozen pizza is better than any restaurant pizza ever.
Yeah, and you probably like pineapple on your pizza too.
I do. I think pineapple on pizza is great. It's okay. You go. Tell me one of yours.
Okay, this is easy. Twitter's better than Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok
I
combined.
think that's because you're old.
Okay. All right.
I'm sorry. Anyways.
What do you got?
Okay. LaCroix and basically all sparkling water tastes like what you get when you go to get a soda and the machine is broken and you get the flat, nasty stuff.
Okay. I actually like it, but it sounds like you feel about sparkling water the way that the rest of the entire world feels about frozen pizza.
No.
So here's one of mine. I hate snow. I don't even want it to snow on Christmas.
What?
No, if there was never snow ever again, I'm good.
Okay. I mean, but even on Christmas, that's just not even.
Don't need it.
Okay. Last one. So I think this is going to be a big one for you, Jason. I don't like superhero movies. And to be fair, I've never seen Star Wars, but I don't think I would like that either.
Okay, so Allie, first of all, those two things are not in the same category. And second of all, what you just said about Star Wars is not an opinion, even. That's just a poorly informed and uneducated prediction. You have not seen the movie, so you can't not like it.
But okay? I can, though. It's even if it is a prediction, it's still my opinion that I don't think I'm going to like it.
Okay.
So...
All right. Agree to disagree.
Okay. Well, so back to the original question. Can we love people we disagree with? First off, are we still friends?
Yeah, okay.
Okay,
yeah.
Fair.
And I'm kind of thinking that's a good question. And then also is there a place we could send people, maybe to another planet, if we don't agree with them?
Okay. Like a Star Wars planet, just
I mean, one in our in our galaxy. And I think actually the story we're about to tell might help. So a little earlier this year, I'm walking into the cafe at the central offices here where I work at Life.Church, and I run into this guy who's legendary here. In my mind, he's the NASA guy. So Chris actually works on our YouVersion team. He's a senior software engineer for the Bible app. And before that, he worked with Boeing as a software engineer on their projects with NASA. And so I'm thinking, like, what do you say when you run into the NASA guy? And like, just so you know, Chris is this super humble and kind person. He would never even tell you that he worked for NASA or with NASA or whatever. But word spreads around the office. And so I start telling him this story that I had recently heard. And the story is the NASA Mars Climate Orbiter. In 1998, NASA launches the Mars Climate Orbiter to study the Martian climate. And then in 1999, they lose contact with it. And $327 million of research and time and equipment just like blows up in space. And so what happened here, right? There's three primary groups involved. There's NASA, then there's two contractors. Jet Propulsion Laboratories, they would help like navigate the spacecraft, and then Lockheed Martin, who helped build the spacecraft. And there's basically software that tells this orbiter how to get into orbit around Mars. And it's using measurements to do that. And it's using like inches and pounds, et cetera, English measurements. And then meanwhile, NASA's other contractor, Jet Propulsion Laboratory, assumes that metric is being used. So I'm telling Chris this, and I think I confused it, and he helped me. And I start to realize, okay, he knows this story. So they're using the same calculations to figure all this out, but their measurements are different. And the orbiter ends up like more than 60 miles off course by the time it's supposed to be entering orbit. And it either burns up or like gets thrown into the Martian atmosphere. We don't even really know for sure. So actually, I've got Chris sitting here with me. Chris, did I tell the story right this time?
Yeah, that's close. It's close enough. It's good.
Close enough. That's good. Okay, I want to hear a little bit more. You worked with NASA, not on the Mars Climate Orbiter. Like, what did you do?
So I worked on International Space Station software development team at Boeing, developing different aspects of the software that operates the space station.
Okay. So it's still software that's going up into space.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
It is crazy.
So what do you do now?
So right now, last 10 years, I've been on the YouVersion team as a senior software engineer, focusing on making all the software that runs behind the scenes on our servers work really well for all of our millions of users around the world.
So when I asked Chris if he would do this interview, he was like, I do mostly like behind the scenes kind of things.
Yeah, I thrive behind the scenes.
Working on software that goes into space, working on software that makes the Bible available to people around the world. So were your parents astronauts or Bible translators? Or, I mean, take me into your childhood. What was your childhood like?
My childhood, no, they were not either of those things. Grew up in a very sort of remote part of southern Louisiana. It's almost swampland. My parents were not Bible translators or astronauts. They were hard workers and faithful Christians. And I mean, I think one of the things that stands out about my childhood that brought me on the path that I was on was just the sort of hard work ethic that my dad put into finishing his college degree while as an adult, raising a family, working a job. Mm-hmm. And then one piece that I remember as clear as day going to church was we gave every Sunday. So tithing, we weren't rich by any means. But every week, trusting God and what he had provided was just part of how my parents lived out their faith. And starting from a foundation of trust with, even before I understood what the relationship with Christ looked like or what faith really looked like, there was this just sort of inherent trust that seemed to be a core piece that I took with me.
So I'm thinking of somebody who grew up in rural Louisiana, right? And then we're missing a big part of the story, but you end up working for Boeing, working on NASA projects, from there working on the Bible app. It seems like you have been around a lot of different worldviews and perspectives, potentially.
Yeah.
How do you think that's impacted you?
I think that's a good question. I'm a personality type that really wants to understand a lot of the detail. I think that's what led me to engineering. And so I remember college, started meeting folks from different backgrounds, different countries, and realized that like things that I just thought were clear-cut and simple to me as a 20-year-old Christian growing up in Louisiana weren't as clear-cut, like social issues and things like that. I think that was one of the first times where I really started thinking like, man, we're looking at the same scenario very differently. All of your experiences so far really lead to how you're looking at a situation, and someone else who's had completely different experiences is going to look at that same situation differently.
So this reminds me of us talking in the cafe that day and me trying to tell you a story that
Yeah.
you already knew.
Yeah.
You started telling me about a philosophical concept that you had started looking into that was helping you understand some of this. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
So this concept is epistemic contextualism. And I guess it's a philosophical idea or view that says an action or an expression can only really be understood relative to the context that action or that expression was made in. And I should be the first to say I don't really read up on philosophical ideas or whatever.
We're not philosophers.
And not a philosopher at all. The reason I even stumbled on this is that I was trying to figure out how do I like to understand things, and at the same time I realized the world is too complex to understand God's creation, but there has to be some framework that other people are using to reason or explain or be okay with the divergence in thought that two people might have.
Right. How can one person think that this fact or this way of doing life is completely true and right when it's seems totally false to me?
And even thinking back within myself, if I look at some of my thoughts as what it meant to follow Christ in college, some of those thoughts are at odds with what I believe now. If I could understand that jump and how I got from there to here, maybe that could help me understand how someone else that seems to be 95% in agreement with my worldview is completely opposite on this one particular topic.
So I think the reason that came up as a result of the Mars story is that there's these two different groups using different measurements. You described earlier going to college and realizing that people had a different context, right? And I'm sitting here thinking about what's going on in my country right now. People feeling like they're looking at the same question, arriving at wildly different answers, and people are frustrated. Have you experienced this before where people came to conclusions that were like wildly opposed to your life?
Yeah. I mean, the specific scenario where I was finally like, I have to figure out how to understand this was meeting this person that I needed to interact with on a regular basis that didn't believe we went to space.
Okay.
Like, my love for space is very evident.
Right.
And so then I started thinking, well, how does that person then view me? It just brought up a bunch of like turmoil and frustration and...
Chris, sorry to jump in, but
Yeah.
like I'm wondering how often that's the case, that when someone's perspective is so different than ours, we're feeling like, well, then what does that mean about me?
Yeah. And whether it's true or not, if that person believes it's true, they're going to interact as if I'm a untrustworthy person because I was duped by this.
So have you figured out how to process this?
I'm not a confrontational person. I like being behind the scenes, and because I don't really argue with people, I don't get in Facebook arguments. But that's not because I'm like better than people who do. It's because I don't like confrontation. It takes a lot of mental energy that I don't have to do that. But in going through this, I realized that like, man, this might actually be worse than that, because at least those people are like speaking up. In my heart, I'm just either really grumpy at people who disagree with me or angry about it, and I just hide it.
Yeah.
I've always been amazed by, in the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 5, in verse 23, Jesus is talking and he says, like, if you're bringing a gift, if you're offering a gift and you remember that your brother has something against you, then put down your gift and go and reconcile. And just the idea that like, it's not enough for me to say, I have something against someone else, so I'm going to go deal with that. if they have something against you, the expectation from Jesus is that you take action to go reconcile it. And then, I mean, Paul saying in Philippians 2, in humility, value others above yourself. And so I'm like, I've got these verses and this idea that it's not enough to just not publicly disagree on Facebook with people. The expectation and a better way of life is much, much more than that. And so I was trying to understand, and I imagine to some people this comes sort of naturally. I don't have that that innate ability.
Well, for most people, like developing software that goes into space doesn't come naturally. So
Yes,
you get a pass.
I'm glad we're all different because a world of me's would be not a very fun world. There'd be excellent software, but nothing else. No joy. Just very correct software. And so this contextualism, for whatever reasons, helped me to understand like how to look at differences. Like in the climate orbiter story, the Lockheed engineers who were working on it and using pounds and feet and empirical units for measurement, they were operating within the context that was what they were supposed to do. So they weren't like trying to mess up the spacecraft. In the context that they were operating in, it was that they were supposed to be using those measurements, and they did their work correctly using that context. On the JPL side, same thing. Their context was that this was supposed to be using metric. And so, yeah, the person who thought we didn't go to space, I don't know that I'm ever going to get to the point where I say, like, it makes perfect sense to me that someone would believe we didn't go to space because
Or insert your own situation here.
But understanding that this person isn't operating in bad faith. They didn't come up with this plan to like somehow cause animosity between us. They evaluated some body of evidence. They came to a different result.
Yeah.
And for some reason, like bringing it down to, I don't know, equations and thinking made it make sense in my brain. I was able to decouple the thoughts and actions of this person from the person itself. It felt like it gave me some more information into the problem. The climate orbiter, again, JPL and Lockheed have gone on to build things together, and they haven't blown up. Actually, the next Mars rover that's going to be landing in 2021, the Perseverance rover, actually has a helicopter on it that Lockheed Martin built.
They didn't just like unfollow each other and never talk again.
No. I mean, it's a bit more constrained here where like if you want a helicopter built for Mars, there's only a few people out there who can actually do that. And if you
ever want to enjoy your holidays again, you might need to work through some of this.
Yeah, exactly. And they didn't get to the answer by just like JPL shouting out the number in metrics and Lockheed shouting out the number in imperial. Right? They figured out, like, how did we get here? What's the underlying pieces that were different for us? And they discussed those. So, like, the answer for us isn't, like, me shouting, we went to the moon, and this person shouting, they didn't.
Right.
It's like, if I really want to resolve this, the answer is, well, why do you distrust the stuff that I trust? And, like, having that conversation could actually go somewhere.
And so this reminds me of how often we just ignore people's experiences. We ignore their pain because we don't like the way that they're talking about it.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a whole nother thing is like, yeah, maybe our issues with each other are sometimes just that we don't like the way people are talking to us.
Yeah.
And there's this thing I hear you saying about like the Jesus way, which is dealing with yourself with a lot of humility and dealing with others with a lot of trust.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I realize just how much I don't understand. So like my reaction initially is like, I don't like what you said, so I'm not going to listen to it or I'm not going to trust it. But a lot of times it's, I don't like what you said because it doesn't make sense to me because I don't understand the context you're coming from.
Or I haven't experienced it.
Yeah, I haven't experienced it. So it sounds very wrong or foreign to me. And if I say that this person is right, then that means I'm wrong. I don't know. I mean, in the MCO case, both of their numbers were valid. They were just incompatible for what they were trying to.
And the main thing that was wrong, like you said, was not so much their numbers, it was not listening to each other.
Yeah.
Okay, so you mentioned Sermon on the Mount earlier, which
Yeah.
I got really excited about because this morning while I'm driving into work, I'm listening to the Sermon on the Mount in my car. And there was one thing Jesus said, and I thought, okay, I need to remember that. So then on my lunch, I open up my phone and I open up the Bible app. And I'm going to pull it out here.
You're not going to give me a bug report, are you?
And I search for, it's Matthew 7:12. And then I press play.
Here is a simple rule of thumb guide for behavior. Ask yourself what you want people to do for you. Then grab the initiative and do it for them. Add up God's law and the prophets, and this is what you get.
So as I played that, the words are on the screen, and there's a little bar next to the words.
Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong. I think you developed that feature and that ability to search audio with like a text search. Like, is that true?
Yeah. The linking text to the audio.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think I know the answer to this, but tell me, why did you develop it?
Because I have trouble reading, which is fun to say on a podcast. It's not quite dyslexia, but it's similar enough. And yeah, I always struggled with reading, and mainly reading was so hard that, especially a text like the Bible, where you're trying to understand what is Jesus trying to say in this parable. And so I found that when we added audio Bibles, that was great. And so yeah, this was one of my projects, was to see if I could join the text and the audio together in a way that would work for most of our languages.
Which, for people like listening, I mean, we're talking
1,400 something languages of text and 500 or 600 languages.
I have no idea how Chris did this, but he made it so that when I type in, this is what I'm looking for, it can somehow search audio, return results, and then when it plays it, a little bar shows me where I'm at. And so if I want to read along, I can.
Yeah.
And what stands out to me about this, in addition to how incredible this technology is this verse where Jesus is saying, ask yourself, what do you want people to do for you? If I'm Chris, I probably want someone to make it easier for me to read the Bible, right?
Yeah.
And then Jesus goes on in the Message version, then grab the initiative and do it for them. Add up God's law and the prophets, and this is what you get. So, Chris,
Yeah.
reflecting on this scripture
Yeah.
and this story, what do you think people need to be thinking about as they try to figure out how to get along with people they disagree with?
I mean, taking the first thing that comes to mind with Facebook is like, do you really enjoy being yelled at on Facebook by someone who partially knows where you're coming from? And if you don't, then you probably shouldn't do the same. I think really giving people benefit of the doubt and thinking about what experiences might they have had that led them to this point of view or this conclusion that may make no sense to you, but that's okay. I mean, it doesn't have to fully make sense to you, but treating people as people. I mean, we're not asked to tolerate people. We're asked to love them. For me, that seems hard. What does that mean, to love them? But I mean, value others above yourself. Like that gets a little bit easier to kind of understand. In humility, value others above yourself.
Hey guys, I'm Audra, one of the storytellers here on the show, and I'm here with Andy. She is our resident kid theologian, as we like to say, and today we have her here to answer some questions about disagreements. Well, hi Andy, thanks for coming back on the show. Is there anything you want to say to anyone before we get started?
Well, I've just been really missing my friends lately because with this whole COVID going around, it's kind of hard to see everybody.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, so I have a couple of questions for you today.
Okay.
The first one I want to ask you is, what do you think it means to disagree with someone?
I think it means to not agree, and it's kind of hard to explain.
Yeah, I totally understand that. Has there ever been a time where you disagreed with a friend?
Yes. My mom told us we can make cake pops, but we could only make one flavor. She likes vanilla and I like chocolate.
Oh.
So if she really, really wanted it, then I would be, okay, fine. Well, not fine, but... I would let my friend do what they wanted to do. And then later on, then they would probably switch off.
Oh, yeah. That's a really good plan, is like sometimes doing what the other person wants, even though it's not what you most want. And then hoping that sometime in the future, they would do the same for you.
Mm-hmm. That's what being a good friend is all about. Because friendship lasts longer than cake pops.
That's awesome. I love that. So how do you feel when you disagree with someone, or what does it make you think about?
It makes me think about, like, this isn't good, this isn't bad, it's okay. This is, it's normal, because everyone's their own person, and we'll work it out later.
What makes you think that, like, this is normal? Like, what puts that thought in your head?
Well, it's like nobody's perfect in the world. Nobody agrees on the same thing. I think it's good to have disagreements, because then you learn and you're like, oh, I know he or she doesn't like that, so I won't do that for them.
In the case of making the cake pops, like, you know that your friend likes a different flavor. So do you think that knowing more things about your friends, like, helps you be a better friend?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. Do you think that there's anything that's too big that if you disagreed with someone on it, you couldn't be friends anymore?
Yeah, I think if somebody punches you and you try to apologize and you try to get them to apologize, but then they punch you again, I would think you just have to, like, not hang out, and you would not just, like, you can look at them and do, like, a smile or something, but you can also just walk away.
Do you have any advice for what you would say to someone who has disagreed with their friend?
I would wait a couple days or a couple hours or something, and then I would work it out. I would apologize first, and then that would get them to say, like, I'm sorry too. Can we still be friends?
Mm-hmm. Do you think that there's anything we can do to get people to agree all the time?
No, because it's the opinion. No, it's like you're being controlled by one person. You do this, you do that. You have to agree on this, you have to agree on that. That's not how we're made to be.
Yeah. Why do you think that we're made to not always agree?
Because God made us, and He made us individually. And I think it's good. Because if we all like the same thing, then it would be like, oh, I know what to do, and you wouldn't have your creativity.
Okay, so all I can think about right now is that Chris's interview is basically us sitting down with a rocket scientist who's telling us how to be nice to each other.
Yes, a super humble and very kind rocket scientist. Chris is the best. But I'm still processing all of his thoughts about how sometimes we're looking at the same problem with a very different way of measuring things. And it reminded me of Colossians 3:13 that says, make allowance for each other's faults and forgive anyone who offends you. Remember, the Lord forgave you, so you must forgive others. So I really like that version because it talks about how making allowance for people's faults, and that's not just ignoring people's faults, but really trying to understand their perspective, or maybe trying to understand where they're coming from with their measurements. And then the part about forgiving anyone who offends you, I mean, that's just something I need to remind myself of often.
Right. And just to make it super clear, we're not saying that everyone gets to have their own view of truth
Right.
and then tolerate each other. That actually wouldn't be very loving. It wouldn't have even kept the Mars climate orbiter from exploding. We all have different ways of coming to where we stand, or how we understand and measure things. And realizing that and making space or allowance for that, and then spending the time to understand others is super vital, but it doesn't end there. We still need some kind of universal way to measure things if we're going to figure out how to really love people well. And we have that in Jesus, right? So this is not just a Sunday school answer. We can study his words and look at his life. We can pray, we can talk with him, and we can read scripture like the Sermon on the Mount that Chris mentioned over and over. And as we get to know him, he becomes our epistemology, that word that Chris used, the truth that we stand on.
I love that. And if you can't understand somebody's context, I love what Bob Goff always says. He says, just have the most generous reason for somebody's behavior that you don't understand. Mm-hmm. And the really hard thing for me is that I really, really like being right. But when I look at Jesus and I read the Sermon on the Mount and all of the things that you were talking about, you realize he focused so much more on being loving. And so it's one thing to just talk about loving people you disagree with or to listen to us talk about it, but it's a whole other thing to actually do it. So that's the question we want you to talk about with your friends, your family, and in your life groups this week is, what are some real life, everyday ways you can love people you disagree with?
Yeah, like maybe I'll get you some frozen pineapple pizza. But don't just talk about it with your life group. Do it. Hey, thank you so much for listening to the You've Heard It Said podcast. So here's the deal. This podcast isn't just supposed to be a conversation that you listen to. We hope it actually starts a conversation with your life group or friends or people you care about. And to make it like really easy for you, we've got questions and resources and all the links we talk about in the conversation guide. It's linked below in the description wherever you're listening. And also, could you do us a solid? I mean, do people still say that? Either way, leave a rating and a review. And we know everyone asks for it, but it really does help so much for people to find our podcast. Have a great week.